Hello everyone, I'm Laura Dormer and I'm the editor of The Evidence Base. I'm pleased to be joined today by Dr Kavita Lamror from Maxis Clinical Sciences. Welcome Kavita. To kick things off, please could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Very glad to be here with you, Laura, today. I am Dr. Kavita Lamror, as you said, a clinical doctor, and I did my master's in public health from Hopkins. I have been in the industry for more than 16 years now, developing value access, analytics, HEOR models, and real-world evidence for products in pharma companies, that is big pharma like Sanofi and Novartis, as well as developing revenue-generating business in service provider companies. I have also worked for the companies for organic and inorganic growth through partnerships, mergers and acquisitions, and more. And I just want to, understand how we can do more for patients in this value-driven healthcare system, and here to discuss more with you today.
So you joined Maxis Clinical Sciences last year to spearhead real-world evidence and digital transformation initiatives. So what projects and strategies have been the most important priorities for you in taking on this role?
I come with a background of having done a lot of real-world evidence studies and real-world evidence tools. And Maxis has a legacy of having great digital products which understand how patient-level clinical data works. So leveraging upon my experiences and what Maxis has, we have this tool that is amazing at data management, which is patient level. And because we understand the real world aspect of it, whether it is coming from variables or claims or registries, wherever the data is coming from, we at this point of time are able to put that data into the OMOP format and make it available for analysis, which can be customized or which can be just default according to the settings our clients want. In addition to that, because we also have the team to do more and it can be ML, we can run the ML algorithms, we are also working towards generating synthetic data sets and working towards how we remove the bias in these synthetic data sets that are generated for, say, rare diseases, orphan indications, and so. Besides this, there is a very active effort to collaborate with other companies, either that are upstream from what we are doing, so that we are more into the PKPD stuff that the company's core doesn't do. What we do is work with these companies that are upstream from what we are doing, and then transition into our real-world evidence portfolio, where we work upon consulting our clients for bespoke solutions and using our tool to optimize and efficiently work upon data management and analytics. So there's collaboration with people who are upstream and downstream working on tools, as well as data providers who would add more value to what our clients are looking at.
So an important topic that is at the forefront at the moment is the area of whole patient health. So just to discuss that a little bit, how would you define whole patient health?
Traditionally, WHO defines health as a state of optimal physical, social, and mental well-being. And health economics, in effect, what it's trying to do is make healthcare more equitable to everyone. So in this whole process of trying to optimize the distribution of resources, somehow we have left out the individual as a whole, and we are looking at the body parts or systems, which has made healthcare very reductive. It's very reductionist and it's very reactionary. So only when you're already diseased, that's when you come and interact with the healthcare system. What whole person health or what whole patient health does is that it starts treating individuals as a whole instead of a body part, and then it empowers them so that they can, as people, as communities, as populations, strive to have a better health. And in general, it promotes their well-being from a social behavioral perspective and not just this reactionary, let's treat my disease now that I'm ill. So that's what whole health is about, a very integrative approach towards treating individuals and not patients.
What role does real-world evidence play in helping to deliver a vision of whole health?
Real-world evidence essentially and historically has been very observational and retrospective in nature. What we are looking at is first work towards identifying if there are models that are more integrative in approach. So if we can go out there in the real world and identify these health systems where we are not just looking at these very specific disease treatment models, we are also looking at primary care, and we are looking at the mental and social well-being of the patient while consulting with the patient about their goals in lives and what activities of daily living matter to them. Across that spectrum, that disease model is what we want to observe and learn from. And then once we have observed and identified those kind of models of care, we go on and see if there are any measurable outcomes from that model. Were there any key outcomes that were identified which are not subjective in nature that will allow us to assess and ascertain that that healthcare model actually did have a positive impact on the patient's well-being or in general the disease state, whether a disease was prevented or whether it was better managed. So these are very tangible metrics we are talking about, which helps us again to move on to the next part of the whole conversation, which is who will do it, how we will do it, and is it scalable? So we are now looking at financing models. We are looking at who will fund these things, who will work, and which communities, which systems can come together to talk to the patients, the healthcare providers, the nurses, the caregivers, and have that one seamless system in place to work on patient well-being and not just, oh, I'm diseased now and I'll treat you for it. And at the end of the whole conversation now, we have the regulatory part where do we have SOPs in place? What can we learn from these systems that are successful? When we are scaling them up and when we are financing them, what is the timeline we are looking at? So it's just the economies at scale that we start looking at and then start saying that, this can be implemented and this cannot be implemented at a population level. And then, the whole population level healthcare is more tangibly affected on a more positive scale where we move towards health instead of disease.
What are some of the challenges of utilizing real-world data in an HEOR HTA setting?
Again, because health economics is looking at economies and value at scale and at population levels, when we start looking at real-world data, the data itself does not measure up historically to what we are looking at because it was not collected for the reason of analysis and research. So we start looking at these data sets which they have missing data points. They do not have timestamps for the kind of health outcomes we are looking at. There are entire healthcare events that are missing. And then for these very events, they might not just be captured routinely because it's not part of the process. It does not, fall into the reimbursement part, and it's just missed completely. That's one part. That's just the data itself. And then there's a whole piece about, how do you collaborate with the data providers? Are they ready to work, or do they have their, they have their cliques where they have the data going out to certain organizations, or the way they process the data coming from multiple sources, multiple places, in multiple formats, how it is being handled, cleaned, transformed. When we are looking at real world data, does it measure up to the scientific integrity that we are looking at as would in randomized controlled trials? Or the biomarkers we have identified, do they have any correlation or relevant correlation with the outcomes, whether it's patient related or clinical, so that the practitioners who need to advice for the treatment, they buy into your argument and they are ready to accept, and they are aware that the treatment has to be given to those patients. And besides this, we have the whole aspect of governance, scalability, and how do we deal with the data privacy aspect, the audits. So there's a bunch of things that do we have to start looking at as the challenges of incorporating real world evidence into HEOR, HTA negotiations, but then it is to augment what we have from RCT, and it can only get better from here if we plan for it better.
Could you tell us a little bit about how Maxis works with partners to integrate real-world data and evidence into clinical research? Are there any recent case studies, case examples that you can share?
Yeah. So because we have this tool that we already work on with clinical data, and the team understands clinical data, when we expanded to the real-world evidence team, we sat down with our end users and we got a briefing about what is it that they want to use this data for. So the key things that we identified were they wanted something more than the competitor. What data can they leverage to push their product more in the market from a scientific perspective. So it had to be high up in the evidentiary tree. Besides the adverse event monitoring that we were doing, we also wanted to look at what measurable outcomes can we clinically correlate for their intervention and use it as a pitch for better reimbursement. And the third part of it was wearable devices, where we are not just collecting the vitals from the patients. What we are also doing is trying to get a sentiment out of these patients, whether they would recommend the intervention to peers, whether they would recommend this in conversations with their caregivers, or just in general, people who are impacted by the disease. So what it did was essentially, we are getting data from the EDCs, we are getting data from wearables, we are putting everything into the OMOP format. There were some default graphs that they are using, and we are good to go with that on the tool. But additionally, then we have some custom analytics that can be run on our statistical computing environment, which their team or our team can work on, and they can write their Python codes, and it can go for regulatory submissions. So one of the key examples that we've been working on very recently.
Looking to the future, how do you hope the use of real-world evidence and delivering on the mission of whole person health will evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? And what do you think is needed to achieve this?
What we need to do is identify all the stakeholders, which is pretty much more or less identified. But what we need to start working on is how to bring everyone together. And for these collaborators, the key is, the key stakeholder is the data provider. Now, when we are looking at these data providers, we are looking at verification of the data, and we need to convince the community that what we are procuring is data that is secure. It is only handled with while we follow guidelines, which are HIPAA and GDPR compliant. And what we are also looking at is how we can exchange this data in fair data marts and not just dump it into a data lake so that we can, create synthetic data sets or just run simulations that don't correlate with the disease or with the cohort. The next step would be we try to, again, work with the stakeholders who are aware of the disease and who are at the receiving end. So that is the patients and the healthcare practitioners, the most impacted ones. They have to be they have to agree with us that the outcomes that we are measuring from real world data, they are what they need to be measured. They agree that these outcomes will make a difference to their lives. It will have an impact on the social determinants of health, and it will also have an impact on moving the needle from, I'm in a disease state to I'm in more of a health state, which is more along the lines of, now I can live healthily and interact with people and peers and live my complete life. And the last part of it is what we are doing as an industry, moving towards technology. That, if we have all these tools, if we have AI, if we can write the ML algorithms, why don't we use it to reduce the dependency on individuals while managing data and just automate the pieces to make everything more reliable, accurate, and exchange worthy, so that it's not just the regulators, but everyone who's interacting with the data, who's using the data for decision making, trusts that what we are doing with the data is worthwhile, it's high up the scientific evidence tree, and they are going to make an impact because the science is correct and it's not just, something we collected along the way. So, yep.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So that was my last question. So I just wanted to thank you, Kavita, for sharing your expertise with us today on these really important topics of real-world evidence and whole person health. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone for watching and for joining us today on The Evidence Space.